Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to my deep dive on the first episode of Star Trek Picard, Remembrance. Haven't really come up with a great name for this series. There's been a few suggestions, but nothing that really stands out to me. So for now, I'm just calling it the Star Trek Picard Deep Dive. This is a video series in which I explore the canon connections, continuity touchstones, and Easter eggs in each episode of new Star Trek as it airs. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first episode of Picard, Remembrance. The episode starts with some gorgeous shots of various nebula and spatial phenomena set to the tune of Blue Skies. You may recall from Star Trek Nemesis that Blue Skies was the gift that Data gave in the form of a song to commemorate Riker and Troy's conjugation at their wedding in Alaska. The song is also used at the end of the episode as an indication that something of Data may have survived in B4. We see the Enterprise D navigating through this region of space, and we zoom in on the windows of a lounge on the ship. There's some debate as to whether or not this is the 10 Forward Lounge, as it's not exactly front and center of the ship, but maybe one of the smaller crew lounges off to the side. There are certainly a few differences between this and the 10 Forward Lounge that may be owing to the fact that this is a dream and not reality, or it may be a different, previously unseen crew lounge altogether. Once inside the Enterprise, we join a poker game in progress between Data and Captain Picard. Now, Star Trek The Next Generation's final episode, All Good Things, ended with a poker game, and to see these characters return to television for the first time, we see joining a poker game, kind of bookending that little bit of experience there. Data's uniform is, of course, anachronistic according to the ship that they're in. This is again contributing to the unreality of the dream, as well as being the last time we saw Data in Star Trek Nemesis. That's how he appears here, so that may be weighing heavily on Picard's mind as he dreams this dream of Data and poker. As the game draws to a close, Picard recognizes that this is a dream and sees that the Enterprise has arrived at Mars. Mars then begins to explode, echoing the attack on Mars that we had previously seen in the Short Treks episode Children of Mars, as well as what will be referenced later in this episode as we learn more about what happened on that fateful day. Mars is, of course, home to Utopia Planitia, the shipyards at which the Enterprise D was constructed. We've seen Utopia Planitia a few times in Star Trek history, most notably in the Voyager episode Relativity. At this point, Picard wakes up from the dream and is comforted by his dog, Number One. Number One, of course, is the nickname that Picard gave to Riker when he served as his first officer on the Enterprise's D&E. Number One is a pit bull, and Patrick Stewart has been known to foster pit bulls and to be a spokesman for their continued care. We get to see Picard's Vineyard, which we previously saw in the TNG episode Family, as well as All Good Things. Winemaking has been a part of the Picard family history for generations, and in fact, if you wish, you can get yourself a bottle of Chateau Picard. From this point, we go to Greater Boston and get a look at the skyline. The city has not been featured in Star Trek before, to my recollection, but this view of the skyline does offer us a few Easter eggs. First of all, we see the symbol of the Ferengi Alliance, indicating that the Ferengi are doing some sort of business in Boston. I'm assuming possibly a gambling establishment or something like that, but that might just be my Ferengi biases coming through. We also see this logo in the bottom corner here, indicating the baseball team, the London Kings. Now, why they would be based in Boston or have a presence there, I'm not sure. And also, it seems that baseball may have been making a comeback in recent years. As we know, it was kind of a defunct game by Star Trek's time period. But the efforts of Cisco and Cassidy Yates and other people may have brought it back. From there, we go into the apartment of what will become one of the primary characters in this episode, Daj, and her boyfriend, who turns out to be a Zahian. Zahians were introduced in the Short Trek episode Runaway, where we met Queen Mihani Ika Halika Po, the leader of the Zahians, who then reappeared in the Discovery episode Such Sweet Sorrow to help Discovery deal with Section 31's control. Dahj mentions to her boyfriend that she's been accepted as a fellow at the Daystrom Institute. The Daystrom Institute has been mentioned on many occasions in Star Trek, and the name originates from Dr. Richard Daystrom, a character we see in the TOS episode The Ultimate Computer. He's responsible for designing the computer systems that Starfleet uses at that time, and had invented a revolutionary new AI called the M5, which proved to be a little bit more trouble than it was worth. Another great Easter egg here, and a little blink and you'll miss it moment, when the assassins come into Dahj's apartment and kill her boyfriend. The knives they use are very similar to the ones used by Shinzon in Star Trek Nemesis, those kind of crazy double-bladed weapons. Another hint that these assassins are Romulan. We do hear one of them speaking Romulan. Of course, it's not quite as distinctive as Klingon, so it's a little harder to pick up on, but we will learn later in the episode that they are in fact Romulans. Now we get to the opening credits, and there are a number of references in the opening credits which will make more sense as the episode and the series go on. One of the pieces of imagery we see is of a Borg cube, which we will see at the very end of this episode. We also get images of a planet being destroyed. Presumably this is Romulus. The destruction of Romulus in a supernova will play a large role in this series. This topic was first mentioned in the Star Trek 2009 film. The destruction of Romulus kicked off the plot wherein Nero and Spock both rode a black hole back in time and created the Kelvin timeline. After the credits, we get a familiar drink order, sort of. Picard goes to a replicator and orders tea Earl Grey decaf. A bit of a change from his usual tea order, and something that we've seen that maybe in his advancing years is on the advice of a doctor. Speaking of the replicator, if you look above the replicator, you'll see a familiar looking oculogram, looking a lot like the LCARs that we see in TNG and the subsequent series and films, updated a little bit for what would presumably be about 2 decades later. So it's good to see that kind of design element making a return in Star Trek here. We see that Picard has a pair of Romulan housekeepers. Now, these two characters were actually introduced in the Star Trek Picard Countdown comic. If you want to learn more about them, you can see them in that comic. It looks as though they've continued their roles as Picard's housekeepers following the loss of their homeworld. We learn that today Picard is providing an interview to the Federation News Network, and we get a look at a few of the crew members that are coming in to set up the shots, and we get a few familiar species there. First of all, the makeup artist who is working on the main reporter is a Bajoran. If you look closely, you see those nasal ridges there. We also have a producer who appears to be Trill, as well as a Tellarite member of the crew as well. Now, it wouldn't be a Picard story without a Shakespeare reference, and we get that at this moment when Picard is talking to Number One, and he says,
"No legacy as rich as honesty." Who said that, Number One?
Which is, of course, from All's Well That Ends Well. A bit further on in the episode, we get a scene where Picard visits the Starfleet archive and his personal belongings that have been placed in storage there. Now, there are a number of Easter eggs in this scene. We, of course, see models of Picard's past ships. We see the Stargazer. We also see this model of the Enterprise E, which is interestingly the first time that this ship, any Sovereign-class ship, has appeared on television instead of a film, and we see it here in model form. We also see the captain's yacht from the Enterprise E, which we saw in Star Trek Insurrection. If you look here, you can see Picard's complete works of Shakespeare, which graced his ready room throughout the Star Trek The Next Generation series. We have a Klingon Duktag and Batleth, presumably from during Picard's time serving as Worf's Chadich in the TNG episode Sins of the Father. Of course, most prominent is the Captain Picard Day banner, which we saw in the TNG episode The Pegasus. And then, of course, we get the reason for Picard's visit to the archive, which is Data's paintings. Data was a prolific painter and was seen often in The Next Generation, painting a variety of subjects. The painting in particular that Picard has come to look at is titled Daughter, and very much resembles the character of Daj, whom Picard has met earlier in this episode. Data, of course, did have a daughter named Lal in the TNG episode The Offspring from the 3rd season, and there are definite similarities here. I have to think that the casting was intended to be very close. Picard does mention that Data always wanted a daughter, but he does not mention that for a short time he did have a daughter in the form of Lal. And it's possible that Daj and her sister Soji, who we will meet later, were both modeled on this ideal that Data had of Lal. It seems that the androids may have been created by Bruce Maddox. I was kind of hoping Bruce Maddox would get a name drop, and the show does not disappoint there. Bruce Maddox was featured in the TNG episode The Measure of a Man from season 2. He wanted to take Data off of the Enterprise and dismantle him to learn how to create more of him. He was stopped thanks to a hearing that established Data's rights as an individual, allowing him to refuse the procedure. Data, however, kept in contact with Bruce Maddox over the years, sending him letters and updates that would hopefully help him pursue his dream of creating another android. However, in the time since Nemesis, because of the attack on Mars, which was conducted by rogue synths or androids, there has been a ban on creating artificial life forms, and Bruce Maddox has apparently since disappeared. In this scene, we also see what remains of B4 in a drawer here at the Daystrom Institute. B4, of course, was the android featured in Star Trek Nemesis, discovered on the planet Kalaris, planted there by Shinzon's forces as the lure for Picard. Now, I'm kind of wondering if they're retconning B4's origins a little bit. In Nemesis, they speculated that B4 was created by Dr. Soong before Data as a prototype, and we do know from TNG that there were a number of prototypes before Data and Lore. However, it's not firmly established. That's merely speculation. In this episode, Dr. Jurati mentions that B4 is an inferior copy. Now, this could just be copy in the sense that it's another version, or it could be copy as in that he was copied from Data. And I'm wondering if they're kind of retconning the idea that B4 was constructed by the Romulans as a lure for Picard and his crew. Again, this is just kind of an idle speculation on my part. There's nothing more in this episode besides that to make me wonder that, but that would almost make more sense to me than this being a prototype by Dr. Soong. Anyway, I'm curious about your thoughts about that. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. So in this scene, of course, Picard learns that Daj is a twin. So now it seems that the mission of the show will be to seek out the second twin, Soji. And we do meet up with her at the end of this episode at a Romulan reclamation site. And this is where we finally see that aforementioned Borg cube in the opening credits. It seems that the Romulans are doing some sort of work here. There's kind of a bit of a hint where Soji says, you work all day restoring people. So are they reclaiming former Borg drones and restoring their humanity or whatever species they are? Romulanidity, something like that. Not sure what they're doing here, but there are a few interesting Easter eggs. First, we get a glimpse of the Romulan logo. Now, Romulus and Remus have both been destroyed in the supernova, so if you look closely, the logo, which used to feature a bird holding two worlds in its talons, now features no worlds. It's just the bird. So, interesting touch there. I thought that was very clever. Now, I also want to comment on a little bit of a musical sting here. We hear a few notes of what I think of as the Romulan theme from the TOS episode Balance of Terror. Which was a very nice touch. I think Jeff Russo did an amazing job with the composing in this episode. And in fact, there's another, if you look at the opening credits, there are a lot of just parts of that are evoking the TNG theme. Most noticeably at the end of the opening credits, you hear a little flute playing a bit of the TNG theme. And the flute, of course, I think evoking Picard's Resican flute from the episode The Inner Light. So lots of great musical cues here. I'm really looking forward to picking those out as we go along as well. If this is any indication, that's going to be a lot of fun. Well, there you go. Those are my continuity touchstones and canon connections and Easter eggs from the Picard episode Remembrance. Were there any that I missed? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks of course to the Patreon supporters for their help in bringing these videos to you. I'm almost completely finally over the cold/flu or whatever the heck it is I've had for the last month, so look for more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video, and which will probably be a live show for episode 2. I'm really enjoying doing those live shows with Bruce and Brandy, so if you'd like to tune in on Friday evenings for those, we'd love to have you. Thank you again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, as always, live long and prosper.